Hello and welcome back to FatbossTV. Today we're having a look at the Hellfire High Council encounter in Hellfire Citadel on the 6.2 PTR.
Yes, and this is one of the earlier bosses. You'll probably be doing this around third, but you do get to kind of choose. Either way, it's an early boss, and it is a council boss. You have got 3 of them, each of them with a separate health pool, and you have got a familiar face here. You've got old xhul'horac Bloodboil from Black Temple. So for the people who played back then, he actually has most of the same abilities, which is pretty cool. He has like one different thing, so you're fighting him plus 2 other bosses, and it's pretty goddamn cool. And even better, when each of them hit 30%, they go absolutely batshit. It's crazy and start smashing everything. It's pretty goddamn cool.
Now with these PTR videos, me and Alex just go over all the abilities and give some feedback on the bosses. This isn't necessarily a guide. If you would like a guide, it will be coming out in the first week when these bosses are released, and if the video does exist, there'll be a link to it in the description of this video and probably the comments as well. So look out for that.
Now, as we have 3 bosses to go through, let's kick it off and look at one of them. We'll start with Dire Dark Whisper. Now, the main thing that she has is an aura that causes the other 2 bosses to become immune entirely to damage if they are within 25 yards of her, and this is up all the time. This basically forces you to 2-tank this fight and make it so, of course, Dark Whisper and her other 2 friends are separated, otherwise you're gonna have a pretty bad time. Now, the main thing that she'll be doing is something called Void Bolt. She'll just constantly spam this on the tank, and it deals just a fairly high amount of shadow damage, and she doesn't really melee hit. She just uses this. However, every now and then, she'll turn into some horrible bastard, some shadowy asshole, and she'll do something called Nightmare Visage. At this time, she'll just wail on your tank really, really hard before returning to her normal self. When you are tanking this, make sure you do use active mitigation, and healers, you probably want to pay attention to your tank at this time because this is where he's going to be taking the most of his damage. Now, her main ability for the entire raid to worry about is something called Mark of the Necromancer. Now, this works very similarly to Rack from Sinestrum, the Bastion of Twilight. This is a permanent debuff that deals ever-increasing ticking damage, and when you dispel this debuff, it will jump to 2 nearby players, reset its damage, and just start ramping up again. Now, the only way that this debuff is removed is when Dark Whisper casts something called Reap. This will remove all the Mark of the Necromancer debuffs from players, but this also causes players to spawn a permanent pool of horrible, gooey shit that will do ticking damage to anyone stood inside. So the idea is that you spam heal the targets with the Mark till you pretty much have to dispel them, and when the Reap does eventually come in, move to the edges of the room if you do have the debuff, and drop the pools in a nice place so it's not in the middle of the raid or anything, and just keep doing that throughout the entire encounter. Another noticeable ability that she does is something called Wailing Horror. This will cause the whole room to be covered in shadows, which will deal light ticking damage to the entire raid. During this time, giant ghosts spawn around the edges of the room and then just come flying across the room, dealing giant magic damage to anyone caught in them. Now, the idea is just that you move from the ghosts, but being around the outside of the room does make this easier. But as you can see, we were kind of stood in the middle and we were pretty much able to avoid most of it, if not just heal it up anyway, so it's not too important. But if you really wanted to min-max, you'll probably be around the outsides of the room to help you avoid these ghosts.
There are all the abilities that you need to deal from Dark Whisper. Next up, we're going to look at Blademaster Judith. Now, he has an ability called Fellblade. This is where he'll just face a random direction. There'll be an arrow that will show the exact direction he's facing, and he'll throw out a boomerang that will then just come straight back towards him. You just need to make sure you avoid the blade just so you don't take any damage. He also has something called Fellstorm. This is when he'll start spinning around, dealing unavoidable damage to the entire raid, and really, it's not like that much damage. It didn't really feel too bad. But we assume once this hits live servers and maybe when it's tuned up a little bit, a healing cooldown would probably be required for it. His main ability that he does is that he'll split into multiple images of himself around the room. Now, these images will either spam the Fellstorm, so the AoE damage on the raid, or will do the Fellblades, which is the boomerang that you need to avoid. When they spawn, the idea probably is just to switch to them immediately and just kill them off as soon as you possibly can. And as soon as you have killed them all off, he will come back into the encounter and things will continue as normal. One thing to note though, which is pretty cool, is that any damage you do to the mirror images will also be placed on the boss as well, which is, I guess, just a nice little bonus.
And the final boss that you'll be dealing with is xhul'horac Bloodboil himself. Now, he has an ability called Bloodboil, and this is pretty much the same as Black Temple with a very small difference. He'll just deal some light physical damage to the 5 players that are furthest away from him. Now, on Heroic, this doesn't actually apply a dot like he used to do in Black Temple, but when you face him on Mythic, he will be applying a dot to you, so you actually have to be doing the encounter properly then. Now you can pretty much ignore this ability on Heroic because the damage it does is so low. However, if you find yourself really low on health, then just try not to be the furthest away from the boss, but that's pretty much about it. He also has a tank debuff called Acidic Wound that lasts for 30 seconds and deals ticking damage and reduces the tank's armor by 100 per stack. Now tank swapping in this fight can be a right pain in the ass due to Dark Whisper's immune aura. If you properly wanted to switch the ads around, you need to like taunt twice and it's just a bit annoying, but the next ability can help you out, which is Fel Rage. Now what he will do is fixate on a random target for 25 seconds and just start wailing on them. However, luckily this target has increased defensive stats, which is amazing, and you do extra damage to the boss, and it's quite significant, which is awesome. Now you can actually bop this target to help reduce damage or use a personal cooldown, which is probably needed towards the end of it because each melee hit that he actually gets off onto this new target increases his attack speed by 10%, so he's doing quite a lot more damage towards the end. Just make sure you do keep this player up as a healer and use any sort of personals if it's on you, and you'll be absolutely fine. Now the way that you can actually use Fel Rage to help drop the Acidic Wound debuff is by having the fixate target move the boss like far away towards the end of the Fel Rage. This means that poor old Bloodboil will have to run all the way back to the tank, hopefully leaving you enough time to drop the debuff. Well, that's the idea that we had anyway. Whether or not it will actually work, you can always try it out. I'm sure it'll be fine. Now he has actually got one new ability that isn't used in Black Temple called Demolishing Leap. This will cause him to jump around the room for a while, dealing large damage to the entire raid. However, the further away you are from the boss's jump circles, the less damage you will take. Now, it is actually pretty important that you do move from this, as if you do stand pretty close to him, you'll probably die. It is quite significant. Think of like Black Hand in phase 1 with the demolition circles. So yeah, move the fuck away from it. And during this time, he doesn't actually do any of his other abilities, so you don't need to worry about that.
So they're all the abilities that the bosses have in this encounter. And really the fight is kind of repetitive. You just keep dealing with all the abilities. You kind of just keep cleaving off one of them or multi-dotting or whatever. But when the bosses individually go below 30% health, as soon as they meet that threshold, they'll gain a new ability.
Yeah, that specific boss will gain a brand new ability until they die.
And these new abilities that they gain are very important because they're pretty much all very deadly in one way or another. So you kind of need to decide in which order you want to kill the bosses, because you always want to deal with the easiest one first, because the most of their 30% abilities sort of leave something on you even after they've died. So on the PTR, we decided to kill Bloodboil first, because his 30% health ability is probably the weakest out of the three, and it's something called Tainted Blood. This is just a permanent debuff on the entire raid that reduces your maximum health by 10%, and there's stacks. But like I said, the debuff will actually remain even after Bloodboil has died. So it's probably a good idea once the boss is reaching that 30% mark that you do try and save some CDs, like DPS CDs, maybe even Bloodlust, because really you want to kind of keep these stacks low because, of course, you've still got other abilities to deal with, and you having lower health sort of gives you less room to fuck up. After Bloodboil died, we decided to switch onto Blademaster, and his 30% health ability is something called Wicked Strike. When he casts this, it just deals unavoidable damage to around half the raid, and to start off it doesn't do that much damage at all. However, the amount of damage this ability deals just stacks up and up and up, even after Blademaster has actually died. So this Wicked Strike isn't too bad, providing you kill this guy off like second. You probably wouldn't want to kill him off first, because by the time you get to the third boss, this will probably be hitting so hard that you just get one shot. So we just killed this guy off second, and it seemed to work perfectly fine.
Now, Dark Whisper is a little bit different because she doesn't actually gain a new ability at 30% HP. She actually loses one. She will no longer cast Reap, meaning that all of the Mark of the Necromancers will stay until the end of the encounter. But on top of that, she ain't going down without a fight. She'll actually place a Mark of the Necromancer on half of the raid as soon as she hits 30% HP. This is so awful, because the healers, pretty much you have to spend the whole time dispelling people, and your raid damage will ramp up so much quicker here, so it's pretty vicious.
And of course, everyone has a lower amount of health anyway because of Bloodboil.
Yeah.
And people are still taking damage from Wicked Strike. So
yeah.
if you're like on low health, you have a Wicked Strike come in, as well as any other abilities, as well as a tick from the Mark of the Necromancer, you're looking at a very swift death.
Yeah, exactly.
Revival also cleared all the debuffs, but we believe before this hits live servers, it probably won't remain like that, because after doing this on Heroic, we then went and did it on Mythic, and on Mythic that didn't work.
Yeah, so it's probably going to change, but either way, like, even though her ability doesn't sound too bad, you just don't want to deal with it on top of two other bosses.
Yeah, it's just too annoying to deal for a long time. Your healers will be spending more time using GCDs on Dispels than actually healing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's generally the order that we decided to do it. We actually managed to kill this boss on the PTR without too many troubles, and it is a relatively simple boss. It isn't too like, wow, fancy, super, there's fucking fireworks everywhere, that's great. But it is an early boss, and I think it's complicated enough to be a good early boss. It was relatively enjoyable to kill it. I know that multi-dotters are going to have, like, this is their fucking dream fight.
Pretty much.
Because not only a cleave DPS kind of like a little bit shit because you can't stack all the mobs up, but when he wind walks, like, you just suddenly see Warlocks and Boomkins just go to the top of the DPS meters because there's just so many ads to dot up. But yeah, relatively cool fight. I doubt you'll have too many issues killing it on live unless they really scale it up, which I don't particularly think they'll do. I think it's just about right as it is. But yeah, good fight, and we'll have to see what it's like on live.
Well, thank you very much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy this little preview, then please do drop us down a like. Helps us out a lot. And if you'd like to see any more of our 6.2 PTR videos, then please do click on the link in the description. That'll take you straight to our playlist, and you can see all of them there.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.